Welcome back, folks. I'm the referee, Connor McCloskey, and here we review D&D adventures and talk D&D adventure design, and today we are looking at Buried in the Bahamas. This is an adventure by Luke Stratton, the pirate wizard limithron himself. It is designed as an introductory It's designed as an introductory intro adventure for Pirate Borg and Pirate Borg campaigns, but the adventure also has a conversion document for 5e, which we'll be looking at today as well. This adventure costs $7.99 at DriveThruRPG, or you can get it at the Limithron shop, which saves them a cut. And this adventure is about 24 pages in total and covers about 23 adventuring locations packed with pirate, skeleton, zombie greatness. The PCs are novice sailors aboard the pirate frigate the Tarantula, run by the tyrannical Captain Bloodwhip. They've been sailing around the Bahamas for 3 weeks, following a map the captain keeps to himself. Foul weather moves in, and the ship is caught in a cataclysmic hurricane. Torrential rain, violent winds, thunder and lightning, and 50-foot ocean swells. Lightning silhouettes a wicked galleon, hull made from thousands of bones, torn black sails, flames spewing from the eye sockets of 3 10-foot-wide skulls mounted on its aftercastle. So overall, this is a classic, swashbuckling, piratey treasure hunt, and it has a giant coating of eerie, dark Caribbean grime that makes Pirate Borg such a great game. It combines adventure, it combines horror, it combines cinematic action and exploration, and overall just hits a lot of the high points of what you would want in an OSR-style Pirate Borg zombie adventure. So for anyone not familiar with the dark Caribbean setting of Pirate Borg, it is set on Earth, just not our version of Earth. Magic is real and incredibly dangerous, and after a massive earthquake, an undead horde known as the Scourge appeared and basically started attacking civilization, and millions died in the aftermath. And now the sea is just filled with derelict ships, the forests and jungles are full of ruins of other civilizations, and everyone is just trying to survive and get rich and live their pirate life in this horror movie version of the Caribbean. Right off the bat here, there is a synopsis that gives you the design intent for the adventure that I think is super useful. It was designed with first-time players and new game masters in mind, and while it starts with a railroad-style introduction, it quickly transitions into a sandbox where you and your players will make your own decisions on how the adventure will unfold. And I think that's absolutely true with the way things are structured. And then there are a bunch of notes on how to run the adventure, lots of useful tips for how to get your session up and going, how to keep up the pace if you're going to run it as a convention adventure or as a one-shot. And then there are also side notes throughout the adventure that are intended for first-time GMs, but are also just great advice for everyone to keep in mind, especially when running a more old-school style adventure like this, and especially if this is your first time doing so, even if you have a lot of other adventure types and game systems under your belt. So we have the opening scene with this dark ship on the horizon, and it's immediately action-packed, it's cinematic. They start boarding the vessel, these skeletons leaping on, and skeleton ogres as the ship rams into their ship. And we'll take a closer look at some of those monster stat blocks later when we go over the conversion document. But overall, basically, they're in the middle of this storm. They get rammed by this skeleton ship, boarded immediately. The battle's going on the deck, and all of a sudden, one of the crew members shouts land. They slam into the land. The boat is now sinking. The captain is dying, impaled on some massive 3-foot wooden spike, and trying to hand you his treasure map. And overall, just a great in media res introduction to the adventure and to Pirate Borg if this is your first time, kicking things off with a bang in an eerie and cinematic way. So in this first follow-up section after that introduction battle, the players find themselves classically marooned on this small desert island known as Conception Island, and they have to start figuring out a plan. There's a bunch of wreckage, there's some other sailors that may have survived, there's a hill that they might be able to go up on and scout around the area, see if they can see anything else. And the adventure gives a good breakdown of what some of those most common actions might be that they might want to take, and how you can respond to those. If they want to explore the island, what they might find. If they want to build a shelter, how they can go about doing that. If they want to hunt and scavenge and try and track down food or water, or build a raft to try and get out of here. What happens and what sort of monsters attack when night falls. And overall, just a really good follow-up to that initial chaotic introduction. Now they're kind of stuck and they have to figure out what they want to try and do next. Once they get their raft up and going, there's a good raft map, as well as a list of encounters that might happen while they're on their raft out in the open ocean after they decide where they're going to head next. And this is where there's a good split in the adventure, where it starts to open up as a sandbox even more, because they have 2 choices for islands they can head to, either Rum Cay or Yuma. And of course, the whole time they have this treasure map that the dying captain handed off to them that they'll likely be trying to sort out where they might be able to track down this buried temple of treasure. And while they're navigating the ocean and heading to one of these islands, the overland map is fantastic. All of the maps are fantastic. The art is fantastic throughout this entire adventure. Also, I love the pointy top hexes, but in general, just great looking maps. They look piratey. They make you want to go and explore, and that goes throughout right through to the dungeon toward the end. So on Rum Cay, we have some adventuring locations they can go around and check out. Got some sea caves, some tide pools. There's a small makeshift port here that they can go and maybe get some information, meet some NPCs. Speaking of which, I like some of these NPCs like Juba, a rotund cook famous for his jovial spirit and crab stuffed snails. He'll pay up to 500 silver for a fresh crate of 10 lost eyes, which are a type of snail. Secretly, he cuts the glowing green gemstone from the snails and has a chest of them stashed in his hut worth 2,000 silver. And all of these little locations are just brief, but really well done. They're atmospheric and interactive, fun to explore. Like, I like the freighter shipwreck number 3. Off the southeast coast is the shipwreck of the HMS Commander, a cargo freighter. To dive to the wreck is 30 foot deep, and there are D4 reef sharks swimming around. In the cargo hold, there's 2 D20 barrels of rum, a sea chest filled with 200 silver and 1 D10 gold cups, and a shadow starfish wrapped around a barrel. And you can see how just exploring that shipwreck, having to dive down, avoiding the sharks, sorting through the treasure, maybe fighting the shadow starfish and its necrotic aura underwater, could all make for a fun exploratory adventure moment at your table. And also, the treasure is well scattered throughout the adventure, as you would hope from a pirate adventure, and also it's thematic, such as the snails that you have to cut the gems out of, or the sunken ship full of rum barrels and treasure that you have to track down and fight a monster for while avoiding sharks. Overall, just great thematic treasure and plenty of it. And also here with the sharks and also the starfish and throughout the adventure, the monster stats are on the page right in the layout, which is great. That's not that helpful for us if we're going to do the 5e version, because we will have to use the stats in the conversion document, but that's still a great touch for anyone who's playing Pirate Borg. The other option is the Isle of Yuma, and Yuma is basically 2 halves here. The northern half is all lush and wild and thick with wildlife and vegetation, but then to the south are all of the ruins of the towns that were here, and plenty of zombies to find and to start hunting down the players once it gets dark. And there's just a very eerie shift as they go further and further down the island. There's also a lot of tack on little places where you could expand the adventure if you wanted to. There's some dry caves that you could expand into sort of a cave dungeon if that's what you were looking to do. There's also a rift in the sea here that is 100 feet wide, 700 feet deep, and there's a community of deep ones of the H.P. Lovecraft sort, who have set up a small village on the edge of this deep hole in the ocean. And here they farm the weird eldritch fish that swim up from the depths. And you do run into some of them if you go and explore this area, but they don't necessarily have to be a combat encounter. They're not a huge fan of zombies either, so depending on which way your players play it, potentially they could even make some allies out of these deep ones. And also on the Isle of Yuma, actually right up at the northernmost tip, are the 3 stones that act as the marker for the treasure map. So it is likely that one of the very first things the players are going to come across when they get to this island is the landmark that they've been looking for. And that brings us to the Cave of 7 Skulls. And basically your players will have to make their way in through these sea caves, up crawling into the land. There are some spirits they may have to deal with. There's a riddle that they'll have to figure out that they've had clues to throughout the adventure so far, where they'll have to mix blood and seawater in order to get a certain set of doors to open. And overall, the Rot Black Sludge style room writing here, which is a Morkborg adventure that is very highly regarded. I've spoken about it in the past, and it's one of my personal favorite layouts and room design. But these rooms give us a great title to set the mood, along with a few follow-up words. And then there is no read aloud text, but there are bullet points that can basically inform your description to the players very easily, with then follow-up items for what to do as your players interact with the room. So for example, we have the sunken tomb, still, water drips, eerie, a stone platform extending over water, murky water 30 foot deep, Mesoan glyphs cover one wall. To decipher the glyphs, they tell of a dynasty of rulers, their 1,000-year rule of an island kingdom, and a dark power that rose from the sea. Under the water is a stone sarcophagus, pictograms show a bird-headed warrior with a club fighting a tentacled monstrosity. There's a dart trap that you have to avoid. And then to open the sarcophagus is a toughness, the equivalent of a strength or constitution check, to hold your breath long enough to open it. And inside is a bird-masked mummy holding the Scepter of Sovereigns. So this is just a teeny tiny little spot on the page for this room, but there is just so much going on there. You can, between the map and the description, just immediately picture and feel the room and interacting with it and the still water and how that might play out at your table. There's also a great puzzle in the tapestry chamber. Basically, this is very close to the final room of the dungeon, and if the players try to pass through the room without that Scepter of Sovereigns from the sunken tomb that maybe they have or have not found yet, then they will be set upon by a 15-foot tall clay monster with a serpent body, bat wings, and 7 clay animal skulls as it speaks in all 7 of its voices. And in this room are also wool tapestries around the wall, lit by 7 braziers that basically are showing these tapestries that continue the story from the sunken tomb earlier. This clay creature has these 7 skulls on it: the stag, the feline, the rodent, the swine, the primate, the serpent, the raptor, all of whom are speaking to the players as it is attacking them. And as they destroy the different tapestries, slowly those skulls crumble, and once all of the skulls are crumbled, then they can actually fight with and engage the monster. So it doesn't feel forced or shoehorned in. It's a cool puzzle. They can circumvent it entirely if they found the treasure earlier by exploring thoroughly, but also it just makes a fight much cooler and gives the players something to use their mind about trying to figure out what's going on while they're in combat. And finally, for all their troubles, they find a magical item, the Orb of Zitulanka. It sparkles atop a plinth with 1,000 silver worth of treasure strewn around the chamber, as well as some other minor magic items. And the orb itself is a 7-inch obsidian sphere, and the translation is the Forever Gate. And basically, the player carrying it can make a spirit test, and if they pass, they can destroy 1 undead with 10 or fewer HP, which I would probably double for 5e once per day. So nothing crazy, but this is a level 1 adventure, and that would be very useful, especially in the Dark Caribbean. But it is the exact sort of thing you would expect to find in this cave by the time you come to the end of the temple. And overall, this entire dungeon section has a great eerie feel, but it also has some Indiana Jones vibes going on. It's got Pirates of the Caribbean mixed in with a sort of Mothership or Prometheus feel. It's overall just a great combination. And on the back page, we get a great crew generator, so it's great for rolling up pirates of all different sorts, whether your players want to use it to roll up their characters, or you need to use it to roll up other crew members that they might run into, or survivors that are on the raft with them, or people they find along the way, whatever it might be. Super useful. And then we get to the conversion document, which you would think might be kind of bland, but it's really not. It's very useful. First, we have mechanical changes to the system if you're going to be playing basically Pirate Borg in 5e. They're brief and straightforward. They talk about only humans, cap it at level 10. They give you a link to the naval combat rules that were written by limithron for 5e. Then they go into the stylistic changes, which are great and are honestly worth considering for any 5e game. And here, I like a bunch of these. Skill checks and other dice rolling should be kept to a minimum. Focus on how players describe their actions rather than their character sheet stats. Only call for checks when failing makes a big difference. Adjust difficulties for skill checks or scale them as you see fit. There's no need for a direct guide as there's no wrong answer. When in doubt, set the DC to 12. Rule of cool is king. They are pirates and swashbucklers. Let them do pirate-like things. The world is much more deadly than normal 5e. Players should often die and new characters from the crew or ship can quickly join. They recommend rolling death saves in secret. There's little to no read-aloud text in Pirate Borg adventures. They leave much of the power up to the GM to fill in the details as you see fit. Rulings over rules. Have fun and keep it fast-paced. I think that's all fantastic advice. And then they recommend reading Principia Apocrypha and the Old School Primer. Those are both classic OSR documents for basically getting in the right mindset for how to run and play in old school Renaissance style games or old school revival style games. And I'm going to link those below, and I highly recommend you check those out. Even if you don't plan on playing this adventure, they are free and they're definitely worth your time. And then actually in the adventure itself, it has a bunch of recommendations for just resources to check out that you might find interesting if you enjoy this style of adventure. And the other one I'm going to call out here is the Chocolate Hammer blog article on Boot Hill and how politics can evolve from dying dying easily. If everybody can die easily, basically the idea is that's how you end up with this sort of cold war of politics and intrigue and needing to negotiate in your game when your players are negotiating for their characters and the referee is negotiating for NPCs who don't want to die and everybody knows that they could probably kill each other. Overall, that's one of my favorite blog articles, so I'll throw that down below as well. There's a quick section on how to reskin bows and arrows into flintlocks, magic as grenades, that sort of thing, how to adapt the 5e classes into maybe more pirate or dark Caribbean themed classes while still keeping them mechanically the same. All super useful and great, very creative ideas for how to do that. And then the monsters themselves are all fantastic and well adapted to 5e. The Pirate Borg stat blocks are actually very bare bones, which is the style of that game, but these 5e ones are really well thought through. So we have the Black Skeleton Marauder, one of the first ones that jumps on the ship. They are brittle, immediately destroyed by critical hits, but they have smoldering blades. Every critical attack deals +2 fire damage. Easy to remember, easy to use, but thematic. The Black Skeleton Ogre has smoldering spikes, more fire damage from crits, but it also has a demonic roar. Each living creature within 30 feet must make a whiz save or become vulnerable to fire damage until the end of the ogre's next turn. And the ogre attacks deal +2 fire damage until then, so its roar basically makes everyone weaker to the attacks that it's going to start unleashing. Or that large clay construct at the end, Titantan, Sentinel of Zitulanka. As I mentioned, it's invulnerable until you destroy all of the tapestries that are associated with its different clay skulls. But I also like its legendary action, Terrible Splendor, forces a creature that can see it to make a whiz save or be unable to move as if grappled until the end of its next turn. This does not prevent the target from being moved by others, so they're just standing there in awe and somebody's got to grab them and get their ass out of there. So overall, great work there, and really basically a full rework of those monsters to not just give them 5e stats, but really give them 5e elements, but try and keep the spirit of the adventure while introducing things like legendary actions. And so I might be biased here because I am already a Pirate Borg fan, but I absolutely love this adventure. It is quick, it's thematic, it's punchy, it hits all the high notes of what you would want a pirate adventure to hit and that you would want a Pirate Borg adventure to hit. It's super well written, it's easy to use. You could literally run it right from the book, having never read any of it before. You could just open it up on game night and start running it, and I don't think you would have any trouble with that, which is something I think very few adventurers accomplish. And I'm giving this 9 stars. I think it is a great example of OSR adventure writing and just adventure design in general. So please remember to subscribe if you find this useful, and if you have a recommendation for a third-party adventure I ought to check out, put it in a comment below. Next time we'll be looking at The City of Arches by Mike Shea of Sly Flourish. I'm a huge fan of a lot of his content and his advice, so I'm excited to check that out. But until then, I've been your referee, Connor McCloskey, and that's today's game. Thanks, guys.